Was any of their motivation race related? Did they leave New York essentially because of white flight? For people who enjoy stories about art and history and true crime, art heist stories are where those fascinations completely intersect. While art theft is never a victimless crime, art heist rarely involve the kind of gory horror that turns some people off from true crime stories. I've recently become fascinated with Jerry and Rita Alter's stories and the story of the Willem de Kooning that they stole and hid behind their bedroom door for years for only their eyes. And I've been doing a deeper dive, and what I've found is kind of horrifying, friends. Let's take a look. Here's a quick rundown for anyone who doesn't know on just who Jerry and Rita Alter are. In 2017, Rita died of a stroke 5 years after Jerry. Their nephew had been made executor of their wild estate, crammed full of oddities and art from their travels around the world. They had loved to tell their friends that they'd been to every continent except Antarctica and show their extensive slideshows proving it. Their nephew Ron thought some of their art might be worth something and sent pictures of what he thought were the best pieces, including a mid century modern abstract nude woman, to several respected art auction houses and museums with no response or simply not interested. So, in frustration, and he himself needing to get back to work because he'd spent like 2 months taking care of their estate, he called an antique store to make an offer on what they wanted. They come through, took pictures, looked around, and offered him 2,000 to take what they found worthwhile, including the nude woman abstract. The nephew then donated the rest to a local garden club thrift store. Now, immediately after the antique store got the abstract into their store, customers started walking up asking if it was real, trying to pick at the paint, see if it was real or if it was just, a textured print or that kind of thing. And the signature on the bottom was de Kooning, as in Willem de Kooning, America's famous immigrant son who helped pioneer the abstract movement of the mid century. Now, famously, it's been revealed that the altars kept the painting hung where it was concealed by their bedroom door for their eyes only, like I said. The couple that owned the antique store searched online and they found the painting had been stolen from an Arizona museum in 1985, and they contacted the museum to give it back. The FBI got involved, and the men that own that antique store, they are absolute heroes. Total heroes. They're examples of how there are still good hearted people left in the world who just want to simply do what's right and good. Thanks to them, the Willem de Kooning woman ochre is back in the museum that it had been donated to all those years ago for public enjoyment. However, while this documentary was being made about the Willem de Kooning painting, they showed two more paintings that they didn't yet know were also stolen paintings. They did realize that they were famous paintings and worth a lot more than what the garden club thrift store that they were donated to could sell them for. So the garden club got in touch with Sotheby's. Now this shocked the nephew because he'd been in touch with Sotheby's and they were like, but once someone did a little more research, then they were interested. And they sold, I want to say, the two of them for around $175,000. And the check went to the garden club. Now, I don't know what's happened since, because since the documentary was made, an art student, I believe in California, did the research and was able to find that these were stolen. Also, it just wasn't even known yet at the time because they weren't valued over $50,000 at the time they were stolen. They didn't make it onto the FBI's registry of stolen art. Now, it's really clear at certain points of the documentary that some people, especially Jerry and Rita's family and some of their neighbors, really want to believe that stealing the de Kooning from the museum was like a one-time event and that they're really good people and they just had this snap moment and took something that maybe they developed a deep emotional relationship with that they felt was theirs to keep for their eyes only forever. But evidence keeps revealing that this is not the case. Like I said, when this documentary was done, they didn't even know yet that they were showing two more stolen paintings in the documentary. Some of the people surmise that because Jerry and Rita lived in the same part of New York as where William de Kooning first was shown, where the woman ochre was first shown in a gallery just down the street from Jerry's sister, that maybe some people have a romantic idea. What if Rita was even the model for it? De Kooning didn't use models for his women figures. Or maybe they knew him, that sort of thing. What if him and Rita had an affair? None of that has panned out to be anything more than just theories as far as we know. Astonishingly, Astonishingly, Jerry published a book of short stories before his death that appear to just be thinly veiled confessions. And pieces are still being put together of just how real these stories are. I'm going to be interested to find out what we learn in the future. Because, like I said, people are still researching them. And it appears, in my opinion, that most of these were taken from his real life. I have a copy of that book on the way, by the way. So, Jerry and Rita's family members, their nephew and Jerry's sister, they seem to have really done their best to put out a reasoning for why the duo did what they did. And something they kept coming back to is, well, Jerry felt cheated of opportunities that he should have had, and he felt very, very slighted by that. And sometimes they suggested that maybe he thought too highly of his own work, and that's why he felt so slighted. That was mainly just the nephew, not so much the sister, and it just nagged at me. I had a feeling that they were given like a kernel of truth while hiding the whole popcorn bag of information of what Jerry's possible true motives could be somewhere in their memory. To me, there were clues revealed whenever the sister especially talked about Jerry and Rita. And it's also obvious that some of them are really, really proud of what Jerry and Rita seem to have got away with. And maybe they don't want Jerry and Rita's legacy to be tarnished in a way that stealing masterpiece artworks just didn't do. So the first hint I had was watching the 2022 documentary, The Thief Collector. There's a portion where they're interviewing Jerry's sister and nephew, and they both mention, looking kind of uncomfortable, in my opinion, that Jerry felt held back, cheated by the school system. There was a vague mention of him not getting the support for handling rough students when he was a teacher, and a black and white photo flashes on the screen of Jerry Alters playing a clarinet in a classroom of mostly black children. This was the first time I wondered if there could be any racial motivation to their move and their life of crime. Was the move white flight? Now, the immediate things that would seem like they weren't motivated by any racial feelings at all is obviously the pictures of them being completely chummy with native tribes of all various shades of brown, much darker than the alters. But more compelling is the fond memories Jerry Alter's students have of him. None of them seem to recall him being anything but an amazingly supportive and inspiring teacher. And I feel most people who maybe have this thought probably dismissed it because of those two things that first come to mind whenever you think of this theory. But I kept digging. I found an old Reddit thread in a subreddit named Long Reads, and it had a link to a very, very long article from 2020s when it was published, where they had interviewed Jerry's sister extensively for 3 years from the time that Rita died and the painting was discovered. And here's where I found some information that, in my opinion, might confirm some of my suspicions. And it also gave me brand new chills at the absolute horror things that Jerry's sister felt comfortable openly admitting to. And it made me feel like maybe possibly Jerry is not a crime anomaly in this family like they all want it to seem. So, like I said, this article was published 2 years before the documentary, and I'm sure Jerry's sister has gotten some media training since then, especially before the documentary, not to say so much. But I can't imagine what kind of things she probably said on camera for this documentary that they didn't show. Because I think we've all learned, all of us true crime people, documentaries are not the unbiased fact finding sessions that some people might think. The directors have generally chosen what narrative will sell or that they want to present for their own reason, and they cut things that don't fit that outline. So Jerry's sister is introduced in this article, and we're made aware that the writer was in contact with her the very year Rita died, like I said, 2017. It says on September 13th, 2017, 1 month after discovery of the painting, I drove to suburban New Jersey to meet Carol Sklar, 82, Jerry Alter's only sibling. After showing the reporter her art and telling her about her husband's, Carol gets very strange immediately and doesn't seem to care at all, in my opinion, how horrifying she sounds. It feels like her goal is for people to be in shock and awe of her. And like Jerry wants recognition. She talks about recognition a lot. And people talk also about Jerry wanting to be famous and how it appears he got it in death. The article says she has agreed to tell me the family story. As she puts it, I am a self proclaimed kind of family archivist and natural raconteur. She turns a catchy phrase. She makes it clear up front that the edible rivalries in the household were raw. I wanted my father for myself. He always used to say, if anything happens, Jerry saves Carol, I save mommy. I hated that, she said. I used to ask him if he had met my mother and me at the same time, who would he have chosen? Okay. Why would a grown adult confess to thoughts so incestuous? That is gross. Like, who would you choose, me or my mom? What? Is she excited by people's disgust? It was my wondering as I'm reading these direct quotes from her, you know? Now, people always wonder, even the people who know about their theft, their neighbors and family, friends, and such, always wonder how they funded their lifestyle, if it was always through theft or something else. Carol dropped another little random nugget that has been completely overlooked, too, in my opinion. The article says the family seemed to have been firmly ensconced in New York City Jewish life. The parents can be seen at gatherings in banquet halls in white linen tablecloths, and men dressed in silk collared dinner jackets, and women in elegant post war chic. Carol says some of the parties were for the Good Fellowship Lodge of the Knights of Pythias, a benevolent organization with which her family was a member. She recalls her parents' apartment had hidden in it, behind the piano, weapons that the Knights of Pythias were to ship to Mandate Palestine. The family supported the fledgling state and despised the British for their restrictions on immigration and their harsh treatment of the aborting Jewish state. We didn't use British petroleum in the car nor tin British flicks. This little aside just made me wonder, if were they assisting in smuggling weapons in the early days of the creation of the nation state of Israel. If his family was involved in that, could Jerry have gotten involved some way early on? Could that explain some of their wild travels? Because some of the stuff they did, there's a neighbor in the documentary saying, well, they were adrenaline junkies. So they would fly to one country and then get smuggled into another country that it was illegal to go into. That's a lot for an adrenaline junkie. I mean, I say that, but we have YouTubers doing that all the time. Still, though, yeah, I just wonder, what do y'all think? Let me know in the comments if you think I'm right or if I'm totally reaching there. It's okay if you think I'm reaching. However, there's one other thing that occurred to me that could have been one of their purposes for going to places where it was illegal for them to go, and that is stealing from third world museums and religious institutions. Because research that's been done in the years since the documentary shows that it appears Rita and Jerry put ads in newspapers in the 70s to sell tribal art for several $1,000s. So they could have been stealing art from these third world countries that they were traveling to and getting smuggled into for adrenaline rushes, and then selling it in America in the 70s and 80s, where it wasn't very well known yet how to research the provenance of that sort of thing, or even that it was wrong yet to buy. A lot of people just didn't know enough about the world. We didn't have the internet and things. They didn't understand that this stuff was often directly stolen whenever they saw it for sale in America. Now, then they go on to talking about Jerry's parents, and the writer says Seymour Bernard Alter is a garrulous looking man, slightly rotund, always smiling, clearly head over heels in love with his wife, the former Mathilda Weinman, who is beautiful, has a knockout figure, and dresses with great care and taste. She stands out from other women with her hats, headpieces, long gloves, and beaded purses. She was a cute one, says Carol. I mean, really cute. The whole family was artistic, Carol explains. My mother loved to draw, my father sang, and he loved art. Seymour was a strong, though unschooled, tenor. Now, like many other families of Jewish immigrants in the early 20th centuries, the Alters were nourished by dreams, limited only by their vivid imaginations and shaped by the creative energy of a people recently released from hundreds of years of constrictions in ghettos and haters. The rough and tumble energy, hopes, and ambitions of these generations changed New York City and the United States. But this particular family got its start at a very unlucky moment. Mathilda and Seymour, aged 19 and 20, were married on August 17, 1929, 2 months before the stock market crash that inaugurated the Great Depression. So the Great Depression just happened, and this starts a real theme of everyone in the family feeling like they're just plagued by bad luck. Everything would just be so much better if it wasn't for their constant bad luck. And most people reading their life stories would consider them to have fantastically good luck. aside from some meanness to each other that, some of them, particularly Carol, maybe couldn't seem to stop themselves from dishing out to the rest of the family, but they seem to have quite astonishingly good luck. But all they can focus on are the things that didn't work out and feel deeply, deeply slighted by that and wanting revenge. And Carol, she starts revealing more and more disturbing thoughts. It is crazy the things that she's comfortable just saying out loud to a reporter and also saying her motivations at the same time. We'll get to those. So the young couple were very, very poor and they were having a hard time making ends meet. And they went to move in with Mathilda's parents, Jerry's mom. Jerry's mother's parents didn't approve of her marriage to Seymour, and they took in Mathilda and Jerry, her baby, only. And they said Seymour would have to live somewhere else. They weren't taking him in. And apparently her mom scolded her and said that, she had no business marrying a man with low prospects like Seymour anyway. And Seymour went and lived with his brother apart from his family, and he got accepted trying out for a local band called My Yiddish Mama. And the family says he was absolutely ecstatic about how he would be singing on the radio. But soon he found out that this meant working on probation until the band actually raised money for the show where everyone could be paid. So he had to move on, finding immediately paying work. And Carol speaks of this like it was a really, really big deal. She says, this is a quote. He was very excited until they told him that the first few months he had to work on probation until they raised money for the show. But my parents needed money, not probation, and my father couldn't accept the job because he had to do what he had to do. She slashes the air with her hand in a grim, fatalistic gesture. This is clearly a story that has great resonance in the family. Both Carol and Jerry embrace the theme of an unfeeling world beating down a good man. Carol expressed this belief in her observations to me, Jerry in his written stories. But in Jerry's renditions, he took the liberty of rewriting the endings as if he could magically restore Seymour to his dreams and dignity. So once Seymour gave up on his dreams of being a musician, he found his way, as Carol put it, by going south, knocking on doors, asking if people had any old gold to sell. She said that impoverished people often sold antique jewelry, evening gowns likely inherited for the cash. He would bring these goods back to New York, distribute some amongst the families, and sell the rest in his thrift store. He apparently had a thriving thrift store and made a good living, and Carol recounts that they grew up surrounded by beautiful things, antiques and art that her father had collected. So this tells us that Jerry grew up knowing a living could be made from resale of antiques and art. So I'm going to read the next three paragraphs of the article because they are weird. Carol gets really excited in her strange way again. That makes me wonder what on earth is her motivation for saying these things? And how does she think they would be received? Does she think there would be like shock or envy? I personally kind of feel horror that she exists comfortably with these thoughts. Okay, the next three paragraphs say Jerry was a band musician and he went to the Catskills and played in the summer. Grossinger's, I think it was Flagler's, 16, 17, and 18. When he was 15, he was doing weddings, bar mitzvahs, and dances. And because he earned his own living, I mean, he didn't spend anything for the household, but he saved money. So even when my father was sick, Jerry had enough to put some money on their bank account. She turns the pages of the album and shows me photos of herself in her late teens. She had steamy good looks, and she knew it. I wanted to be different. I used Hollywood movies as examples of what I wanted to be like, or Russian novels. I wanted to be some kind of Natasha, something other than who I am. And what was I? Just a little Jewish girl from Brooklyn with visions of another world? She vowed she would never work and never have children. Never wanted to have useful skills or be employable. That's one reason I majored in fine arts. Philosophy would have been a second choice. She kept those vows with the help of a rent-controlled apartment and two marriages to highly successful creative men. I wanted beauty and fame, she said. I was pretty, and my fame came from the men I married. Whatever I achieved, I got from association with others who were great. With me, it had to happen magically. This is so strange to me. She admits she desperately wants fame, but also has made a determined decade long vow to do nothing useful at all ever to achieve it. She does not want to be employable or have any useful skills, according to her own quotes. And, as someone who's been an amateur artist showing at small galleries for 20 years, interacting with various artists at all levels, she's the only person I have ever heard say that they majored in fine arts with the goal of having no employable skills. Most people who get a fine arts degree get it because they are hoping to go high in the art world on their skills. I'm just in shock. But she gets worse. She gets worse. In the middle of her self expose, she switches back to Jerry and Rita and Woman Ochre, the Kooning painting, to express what about the coverage of this is bothering her. She says, everyone says it's so strange they had the painting in their bedroom. Carol says, changing the subject, I have to stress this strongly. I have art in bathrooms, I have art in closets. I'm not hiding it. Art in living rooms is not more important than art in the cellar. I don't consider anything hidden in someone's house. If you really want to hide it, dig a hole in the garden. The writer immediately says that they're shocked at her willful misunderstanding because what people have been commenting on is the fact that they hid it from the public's eyes behind the bedroom door where it was their eyes only. Like, nobody thinks they were hiding it completely. They are talking about the fact they hid it from any public viewing. Most people who have a masterpiece want to show it off. Obviously, not if it's stolen, but yeah, that is what people were commenting on, how it was a bit of a clue that there was something up with it, the way that it was hidden from the public view. But she just chose to completely misunderstand that and talk about how she puts art everywhere. The way she describes it, she sounds like she's just running out of room. As an artist myself, I know that this happens. Sometimes we just start hanging paintings like all up and down the walls because on the wall is the safest place for the painting to make sure it doesn't get kicked around, bumped, scuffed, something fall into it and puncture it or that kind of thing. On the wall is always the safest place, but every now and then, as a prolific artist myself, we have to be like, oh crap, I'm going to have to just give some away. This is getting to critical mass and it's going to enclose on me. But yeah, she talks about how she has every bit of wall space covered, much like Jerry Alters did, and keeps it where she can see her art, whether it's in the closet or in the toilet. And I also have to say, keeping art in the bathroom is terrible for it due to moisture, but I digress. Now, immediately after that, she gets even worse with her statements that appear to be just desperate to shock. Carol says, before, I was tending to think Jerry might have bought the painting at an estate sale in Scottsdale or something, she says. Now, if it turned out that he and Rita stole it, it strikes me as kind of thrilling. I kind of love it, my brother and his wife, as Bonnie and Clyde, because I'd go out and kill somebody tomorrow to be recognized, wouldn't you? That is the end of the quote. That was a direct quote from her. I love it. It's thrilling. My brother and his wife is Bonnie and Clyde. I'd go out and kill somebody tomorrow to be recognized, wouldn't you? And the author didn't even bother to give a response or commentary to that. And this is part of the reason why I bet that documentary crew has some crazy cut footage of this lady. What the actual hell? She literally just said she would murder for fame. I'm surprised she hasn't already. Or has she? Allegedly, I don't want to get sued. I'm just commenting on publicly made comments. Friends? It's wild when you first see Carol in the documentary, she comes in like it's just in this way, like smiling directly at the camera. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, she wants to be noticed. Now, I didn't immediately assign bad negative connotations to someone wanting to be noticed. And wanting to be noticed in itself isn't a bad thing. I'm an artist and a YouTuber. I want my YouTube channel to be noticed. I want people to watch my videos. I want people to like my art. Wanting to be noticed in itself, that's not negative. However, after finding this article and reading the things that she's willing to say and allege that she would do, up to and including murder, to be noticed and get recognition, I'm recalling that feeling with a way creepier vibe now. So their father, Seymour, died suddenly from a heart attack. Shockingly, it was after his wife came to the hospital where he was checked in for some work because he had already had a heart attack and was having trouble from it. She brought him some slippers to the hospital and he objected to the fact that they were black and what Carol describes as sudden bout of superstition. And the article says he immediately threw his arms wide and had a heart attack and died. And the family never got over it. Now, Jerry wrote a story which a character is clearly based on his father and has a heart attack and recovers as he loved, as we said before, to rewrite happy endings for himself and his family. Carol shares that Jerry was a musician in a band playing at the Catskills when he saw Rita waiting for a date with another band member, and he decided he wanted her. He stepped up to Rita and told her that her date wasn't coming, but she could go with him. It was a lie, but it worked. And like most everything else in life, Jerry got away with it. Everyone reports that Rita was madly in love with Jerry for the rest of her life. Now, of course, as we have come to expect of Carol by this point in the article, after sharing a little bit about Jerry and Rita, she immediately turns it back to herself and relays another absolutely distasteful story about her own morals. Listen to this quote from the article, friends. Very few folks were in the park. She's talking about riding her bike in Central Park, and she brags about what kind of bike she had. It was about 9 a.m., and then I carried my bike down the stairs to Bethesda Fountain and sat on the rim. I looked over my shoulder, and coming down from the boathouse was this man, and I said to myself, he was going to sit down beside me on my left side, and he did. She was wearing green snakeskin boots with a light green pantyhose, a scoop necked lavender jersey under my jeans jacket, and blue denim miniskirt. I still have the jacket, she says. And we talked and talked. He had just come back from Colombia and he was married and he had a little baby. But the way I saw it, too bad, it was up to him to look after his baby. His loss was the true love of his daughter. But the gain was a true love for me, and I would not have traded it for anything in the world. I cannot think of any time I've ever heard anyone speak so coldly about breaking up not only a marriage, but the father and daughter never reconciling over it. She literally doesn't care at all about anything except herself. Lot of people are that way a bit, sometimes to an uncomfortable level. This is so blatant. It's gross, in my opinion. It's really eerie how proud she is of her selfishness, and I think she feels like maybe it makes her mysterious and alluring, and she doesn't realize that it makes good people's skin crawl. Like, it really does. Ugh. So then we get some really interesting information about Rita. The article is mostly about Jerry's family, but there is this nugget when the article says theft appears as a theme in Rita Alter's side of the family as well. Roseman told me that a year after the discovery of the painting in his aunt and uncle's house, he found out from a long estranged cousin that Rita and her sister, Roseman's own mother, had conspired to pilfer the estate of their own mother and keep it for themselves, leaving out their two brothers. My mother and Aunt Rita saw to it that their brothers would not get anything, he said. He believes the Cliff House was purchased with money from his grandmother's estate. When my grandmother died, it wasn't a few months before Jerry and Rita bought that place. If you're able to screw your own brothers out of their inheritance, how much further would you have to go to steal something from strangers? And he makes a good point. And it also kind of lends credence to Jerry and Rita's Mexico neighbors who were saying that they explained their nice house and pool by saying they inherited the money. Once again, it sounds like there was a kernel of truth to that. And it also really reveals that Rita had a criminal and cold mindset as well. Because a lot of people who knew her appeared to want to believe that maybe Rita just simply loved Jerry so much that she'd do anything he wanted. But evidence seemed to suggest they were a true crime couple in the sense that they both loved not only the spoils of their criminality, but they enjoyed the game, the process. The author mentions that one of Carol's husbands appears to have had a thrilling life, and Carol seems to get really petulant. The author is interested in him, not her. She says, "You are impressed by Wallace's accomplishments." She wrote me in an email. "Why not? I have no impulse to tell you about us, though. It does me no good to recount my once thrilling life." Oh my God. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe this lady has a secret life. What do y'all think, friends? Says when the writer asked Carol if she thinks Jerry would have seen the woman ochre de Kooning when it was displayed at a gallery near them in the 50s while they were in New York, whether she thinks he would have liked it. Carol again says something really, really strange. She says, "I don't think he was envious of those painters in that world. If he were envious of anything, it would be the ease at which some people find recognition. He had less luck, less good luck." Now, this hints to me of what other people said more plainly, that Jerry believed his work was as good as any master's, and it was simply bad luck that kept him from getting the same kind of recognition that they did. And this would also explain why he felt no compunction whatsoever about retouching a master de Kooning himself and not even caring he wasn't even using the same kind of paint. Conservators that worked on this painting after its recovery have revealed that when Jerry touched up Woman Ochre, trying to repair some damage he did to it while stealing it, he didn't even use oil paint. Like, that's crazy. So the story then comes back to Carol and Jerry's father, Seymour, and Carol, once again, she just casually confesses to awful things. The article says, although Carol describes the family's great love for husband and father Seymour, there were undercurrents of neglect in the family as well. There was a level of denial that allowed Carol's Oedipal fantasies to persist unchallenged, and it was also displayed in the family's reaction to Seymour's first heart attack. Carol and Mathilda were so shocked by the effect on Seymour's health, Carol said that they reacted as if it hadn't happened. I'm kind of an unbeliever in many things, says Carol. If you tell me you don't feel very well, I'm like, yeah, she's not really sick. Or maybe it's not wanting to believe. If my father had to lie down, he was malingering. Is this woman crazy? The article continues. One can imagine the teenage Jerry, who identified so strongly with his father, crumbling a little bit more every time his mother and sister mocked his 39-year-old dad when he was forced to catch his breath and rest. In his stories, there's not a small amount of sexual violence, female travelers group during robberies, violent attacks against women who mistreated his autobiographical characters or did them wrong. Over halfway through the article, in the midst of Carol's constant horrifying confessions, I saw what I suspected I might find. And that was Carol unabashedly telling why Jerry felt slighted by the school system, a narrative that's completely missing from the documentary. The article says he got a job teaching music at PS 187 in Washington Heights, where he taught grades 3 through 6 and ran an orchestra and the Glee Club. Jerry soon decided he wanted to become an assistant principal, and he studied at night for accreditation at Columbia University. But the promotion didn't come through as speedily as Jerry wanted. Carol remembers that Jerry's placement in a school was held back by affirmative action. Carol said, affirmative action was not affirmative for white teachers. Jerry scored very high on his qualifying exam and expected to get a position after taking a couple of years of expensive courses at Columbia. An acquaintance of mine who also began teaching in the 1960s and who insisted on remaining anonymous because of continuing employment in the school system said, at that time, if you were white and Jewish, you could not get promoted. So, a bit down on in the article, Carol appears to agree. She says the lack of a promotion angered Jerry. I'd say it got him upset, said Carol. Jobs should be based on your proving yourself. The color of your skin should not have anything to do with it. If you were a Chinese person, would you say you could only learn from an Asian person? Now, once again, she is completely ignoring the fact that segregation had mostly prevented the Black population from having the opportunities to prove themselves. That's why affirmative action was needed in a lot of people's opinions. I know affirmative action has a lot of pros and cons, people for and against, and everything, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds with that. But it just feels like she's deliberately misunderstanding what went on, kind of in the same way she did with the painting being behind the door. Let me know what y'all think in the comments, friends. Now, something that some neighbors said is the alters kind of covered their extravagant travel spending by acting in ways that always made them seem very, very frugal and give plausible deniability to nefarious activities being the source of their lifestyle. It is possible that their trips to countries full of people of color living amongst them, taking smiling pictures with their arms around each other, what if that also gave plausible deniability to their deep resentment towards affirmative action for African Americans and whether or not that had anything to do with their plundering of art objects because they felt cheated? Like I said, since the documentary was made, more research has been done and posts have been found where Jerry and Rita seem to be trying to sell tribal art in newspapers for several thousands of dollars. Well, the last thing in this documentary that was another hint to me that maybe there was some racial connotations to their motivations was the story of a neighbor lady who apparently thought Rita was just the nicest person. But one day while talking to her, Rita suddenly told her a story out of the blue, kind of the way Carol just blurts out her awful confessions to this interviewer. A story Jerry has told as well and shared pictures from. They were in an African nation. Carol said they saw two tribes sort of come together for a conflict or encounter. Now, the story is that Rita said she didn't know if it was a ritual or a battle, but that people were killed in front of their eyes, and some of them were women. Apparently, this neighbor was told that Jerry and Rita positioned themselves on a hill where they could see both sides and watch the killings. But Jerry's description says he was able to sneak down closer and get pictures close up. Some of the pictures that were shown in the documentary show tribal people running on the opposite side of a chain link fence, which is a little odd. I don't know what the chain link fence is about. And some of them have spears. The lady said Rita recounted watching the deaths as if she was telling a story about going to Disneyland and seeing a show. And the woman was deeply disturbed. She was never able to think of or look at Rita alter the same again. Oh, why was Rita so comfortable watching a gory display of death right in front of her? We may never know, but I want to know what your conclusion is. Do you think any of these things that I've posited as theories are right or if they're reaching? I'm going to do another video on this, and we're going to talk about Jerry and Rita's septic tank. But for now, we'll go out with a little palate cleanser. Have a good day, friends. Let me know what y'all think in the comments.